Marcus said he was going to run some errands. "I'll be back in a couple of hours," he said, kissing me on the forehead. "Love you." Those were the last words he ever said to me as my partner, as the father of my child. Hours passed. I checked my phone constantly, expecting a text or a call. Nothing. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. My anxiety started to creep in. My name is Rachel Williams, and I'm 30 years old. Looking back, it feels like 2 different lifetimes ago that I was happily planning a future with Marcus. We'd met at a local coffee shop, both reaching for the same blueberry muffin. Corny, I know, but it felt like fate. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in building a life with me. We moved in together after a year, painted the spare room a soft yellow, dreaming of the nursery it would become. Those early days were filled with laughter and shared dreams. We'd take long walks in the park, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. He even started taking prenatal classes with me, looking a little green around the gills during the breathing exercises, but always there, always supportive. We were a team, or so I thought. Our little apartment felt cozy, safe, filled with the promise of our growing family. I'd spend hours imagining what our daughter would look like, who she would become. Marcus would put his hand on my belly, feeling her little kicks, and we'd both marvel at the miracle of life. We picked out names together, debated the merits of different strollers, and carefully folded tiny baby clothes. Everything felt perfect, idyllic even. I worked as a graphic designer from home, creating websites and logos for small businesses. Marcus had a steady job at a construction company. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, content. We had enough to cover the bills, buy groceries, and even splurge on the occasional movie night. Our friends envied our seemingly perfect relationship, the easy way we seemed to navigate life together. I remember the baby shower my friends threw for me. The room was filled with pink balloons and tiny outfits. Marcus stood by my side, beaming, as I opened each gift. He even teared up a little when I unwrapped a hand-knitted blanket from my grandmother. He seemed so happy, so excited about becoming a father. That's why what happened next was so unexpected, so devastating. Because underneath it all, something dark was lurking, something I never saw coming. It shattered my world, and my beautiful vision of the future, into a million pieces. It was like waking up from a beautiful dream to find myself trapped in a nightmare. The morning it happened started like any other. The sun streamed through the blinds, painting stripes across our bed. Eva, our 4-month-old daughter, was cooing softly in her bassinet beside us. Marcus reached over and gently stroked my hair. "Morning, beautiful," he whispered, his voice still rough with sleep. I smiled, feeling a familiar sense of contentment wash over me. I had no idea it would be the last time I felt that way for a very long time. I got up, made coffee, and started preparing Eva's bottle. Marcus was unusually quiet, but I chalked it up to him being tired. He'd been working long hours lately. After feeding Eva, I put her down for a nap and went to my computer to start work. Marcus said he was going to run some errands. "I'll be back in a couple of hours," he said, kissing me on the forehead. "Love you." Those were the last words he ever said to me as my partner, as the father of my child. Hours passed. I checked my phone constantly, expecting a text or a call. Nothing. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. My anxiety started to creep in. Maybe he'd gotten into an accident? I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, a dark cloud in my mind. By evening, panic had set in. I called his work, but they said he hadn't been there all day. I called his friends, his family. No one had seen or heard from him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Around 8 p.m., I noticed something was off. A drawer in the bedroom was slightly ajar. I walked over and opened it. Empty. That's when I saw it. The closet, usually overflowing with his clothes, was bare. His side of the bed was neatly made, as if he had never slept there. He was gone. He had left. Just like that. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. How could he do this? To me? To Eva? What had I done wrong? I stumbled through the apartment, searching for a note, some kind of explanation. Anything. But there was nothing. He had simply disappeared, taking his belongings and leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a 4-month-old baby. The full weight of the situation crashed down on me. I was alone. A single mother. With no job security and a mountain of bills to pay. My carefully constructed world had crumbled around me, leaving me buried under the rubble. The pain was unbearable, a constant ache in my chest. It felt like I was drowning, gasping for air, with no one to pull me to safety. The shock was only beginning. The first few days after Marcus left were a blur. I barely remember eating or sleeping. My mom rushed over as soon as I called, her face etched with worry. She held me while I sobbed, whispering words of comfort that I couldn't quite register. My dad, usually a man of few words, paced the apartment, his jaw tight with anger. My sister, Sarah, took over the practical stuff. She changed Eva's diapers, prepared her bottles, and even managed to get her to smile. I felt like I was watching everything from behind a thick pane of glass, unable to fully participate in my own life. The apartment felt empty, cold. Every object seemed to remind me of Marcus. His toothbrush in the holder, his favorite mug on the counter, his side of the bed untouched. I couldn't bear to look at them, to touch them. It was like living in a museum of our failed relationship. The financial strain was immediate and terrifying. Rent was due, and I had no idea how I was going to pay it. My freelance work had slowed down since Eva was born, and I was relying on Marcus's income to make ends meet. Now, I was facing eviction, with a baby to care for. My parents helped me apply for government assistance, but the process was slow and confusing. I spent hours on the phone, navigating bureaucratic red tape, feeling increasingly frustrated and hopeless. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. When Eva wasn't crying, my mind was racing, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for clues, for answers. Where did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? The loneliness was crushing. I longed for someone to talk to, someone who understood what I was going through. But I felt ashamed, embarrassed. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this happen? My friends tried to be supportive, but they couldn't fully grasp the depth of my despair. They offered platitudes and advice, but it all felt hollow, meaningless. I felt like I was living in a different world, a world of broken dreams and shattered promises. Despite the overwhelming pain and fear, one thing kept me going: Eva. Her tiny face, her innocent eyes, her unwavering dependence on me. She was my reason to get out of bed each morning, my reason to keep fighting. I knew I had to be strong for her, even when I felt like I was falling apart. She deserved a better life, and I was determined to give it to her, no matter what it took. The first step was finding a way to cope, to survive. And that meant accepting the help my family was so willing to give. My family became my lifeline. They were the anchor that kept me from drifting away completely. My mom, especially, was a constant presence. She moved into the apartment temporarily, helping with Eva, cooking meals, and just being there to listen when I needed to talk. She never judged, never criticized. She simply offered unconditional love and support. My dad, despite his gruff exterior, showed his love in practical ways. He took care of all the household repairs, fixed the leaky faucet, and even mowed the tiny patch of grass in front of our building. He also started driving me to appointments, knowing how anxious I was about getting around on my own with Eva. Sarah, my sister, was my rock. She had a way of making me laugh, even when I felt like I would never smile again. She organized playdates with her friends who had kids, giving me a chance to socialize and feel like a normal person again. She also helped me revamp my resume and start looking for more stable work. Their support wasn't just about the practical things, though. It was about the emotional reassurance they provided. They constantly reminded me that I was strong, capable, and deserving of love. They celebrated my small victories, like when I finally managed to get Eva to sleep through the night, or when I landed a new freelance client. They never let me forget that I was not alone. In stark contrast to their unwavering support was Marcus's complete absence. He never called, never texted, never reached out in any way. It was as if Eva and I had ceased to exist in his world. I sent him emails, pleading for him to explain his actions, to at least acknowledge his daughter. But he never responded. It was like shouting into a void. His silence was deafening, a constant reminder of his betrayal. It fueled my anger, my resentment, my determination to hold him accountable. While my family was busy picking up the pieces of my shattered life, he was nowhere to be found, shirking his responsibilities and leaving me to face the consequences of his actions. The contrast between their love and his abandonment was stark and painful. It made me appreciate my family even more, and it solidified my resolve to build a better future for Eva, a future where she would know that she was loved, cherished, and protected. Even if her father couldn't be bothered to be a part of it. Their presence filled the gaping hole he had left, not completely, but enough to allow me to breathe again, to begin to heal. The silence from Marcus was a constant, gnawing ache. It wasn't just the absence of his physical presence, it was the complete void where his voice, his support, his love should have been. I tried everything to break through that wall of silence. I started with simple text messages. "Marcus, please, just tell me you're okay. Eva misses you. We need to talk." Each message was met with the same deafening silence. Then I moved on to emails. Longer, more heartfelt messages, pouring out my pain, my confusion, my desperation. I wrote about Eva's milestones, her first smile, her first giggle, hoping to tug at his heartstrings, to remind him of the bond he was missing. Still nothing. I even tried calling his parents, hoping they might have some information. They were polite, but evasive. They claimed they hadn't heard from him either, but I sensed they were holding something back. The lack of response was agonizing. It felt like he was deliberately trying to erase us from his life. Every unanswered call, every unread email, was a fresh wound. I started to question my sanity. Was I crazy to keep trying? Was I wasting my time on someone who clearly didn't care? The silence also fueled my imagination. I conjured up all sorts of scenarios. Maybe he was sick, injured, unable to contact us. Maybe he was being held against his will. The possibilities were endless, and each one was more terrifying than the last. As the weeks turned into months, the hope that he would return dwindled. I started to accept the reality that he was gone for good. But even then, the silence continued to haunt me. I needed answers. I deserved an explanation. Why had he left? What had I done to deserve this? The emotional toll was immense. I struggled with anxiety, depression, and a constant sense of grief. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't concentrate. I was a shell of my former self, consumed by the pain of his abandonment and the frustration of his silence. Despite the overwhelming despair, I refused to give up. I knew I had to find a way to move on, to heal, to build a better future for Eva. But first, I needed to understand why he had left, even if it meant facing the harsh truth that he simply didn't care. The day that truth finally presented itself would be more shocking and infuriating than I could have ever imagined. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me it was him. Hesitantly, I answered. "Hello?" A weak, raspy voice came through the speaker. "Rachel? It's Marcus." My heart pounded in my chest. After months of silence, he was finally calling. But the relief was short-lived. I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice trembling. "Where have you been?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Why did you leave?" He ignored my questions. "I'm sick, Rachel. Really sick." "What do you mean?" He took a shaky breath. "I have HIV. And hepatitis B." I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "What?" How? I don't know, he said, his voice laced with self-pity. But the doctors think I've had it for a while. Maybe you gave it to me. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy, nauseous. That's impossible, I exclaimed. I was tested after Eva was born. I was clean. Maybe the test was wrong, he insisted. Maybe you were a carrier and didn't know it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After abandoning me and our daughter, he was now accusing me of giving him a life-threatening illness. The audacity was staggering. Are you serious? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You disappear for months, and then you call me to blame me for your sickness? I'm not blaming you, he said weakly. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Scared? I scoffed. You think you're the only one who's scared? You left me with nothing, Marcus. I've been struggling to survive, to take care of Eva, all on my own. And now you have the nerve to call me and play the victim? I hung up the phone, my body trembling with rage. I couldn't believe he had the gall to call me after everything he had done. And to accuse me of infecting him with HIV and hepatitis B? It was beyond comprehension. But amidst the anger and disbelief, a seed of determination began to sprout. I wouldn't let him get away with this. I wouldn't let him play the victim. I would fight back, and I would make him regret ever walking away from me and Eva. The first step was proving his accusation was a lie. My first reaction was disbelief. How could he accuse me of something so serious, so hurtful? But then the fear set in. What if he was right? What if the initial test after Eva's birth had been a false negative? What if I had unknowingly infected my own daughter? I couldn't take any chances. I immediately called my doctor and explained the situation. She was shocked and concerned, but assured me that false negatives were rare. Still, she scheduled appointments for both Eva and me to be retested as soon as possible. The days leading up to the test were agonizing. I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of Eva suffering from a terrible illness. I spent hours researching HIV and hepatitis B, trying to understand the risks and symptoms. I felt like I was living in a constant state of panic. Finally, the day of the tests arrived. I held Eva tightly in my arms as the nurse drew our blood. She didn't understand what was happening, but she sensed my anxiety and started to cry. It broke my heart to see her so upset. We waited anxiously for the results, checking our phones every few minutes. The doctor had promised to call as soon as they were available. The hours stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the phone rang. It was my doctor. My heart pounded in my chest as I answered. Rachel, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. I have the results of your tests. I held my breath, bracing myself for the worst. Both you and Eva tested negative for HIV and hepatitis B, she announced. You are both perfectly healthy. Relief washed over me in a tidal wave. I burst into tears, overwhelmed with gratitude and joy. I hugged Eva tightly, burying my face in her soft hair. We were safe. We were okay. But even as I celebrated our good health, a new wave of anger washed over me. Marcus had lied. He had deliberately tried to hurt me, to damage my reputation, to turn me into the villain in his twisted story. Now that I knew I was innocent, I was even more determined to hold him accountable for his actions. I wouldn't let him get away with his lies. I would fight back, and I would make him regret ever trying to destroy my life. I knew proving my innocence was just the first step. Now, I had to figure out how to expose his lies and protect myself and Eva from his malicious accusations. The answer, I realized, might lie in his past. If Marcus thought he could make me the villain, he was sorely mistaken. I decided to dig into his past, hoping to uncover some truth about the man I thought I knew. It wasn't easy. I started with social media, searching for any mention of past relationships. I found a few old profiles, but nothing concrete. Then, I remembered Sarah, my tech-savvy sister. I explained my situation, and she offered to help. Using her computer skills, she managed to find some old online forums where Marcus had been active years ago. There, I discovered snippets of conversations that hinted at a pattern of behavior I found disturbing. He'd bragged about dating multiple women at the same time, about lying to them to get what he wanted. He'd even made crude jokes about avoiding responsibility and commitment. It was like reading about a completely different person. Emboldened by these discoveries, I decided to reach out to some of Marcus's old acquaintances. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but I was desperate for information. I contacted a few women who had been listed as friends on his social media accounts. At first, they were hesitant to talk. But when I explained what had happened and how Marcus had accused me of giving him a disease, they became more forthcoming. One woman, named Emily, told me that Marcus had disappeared on her suddenly, just like he had on me. She said he had drained her bank account and left her with a pile of debt. Another woman, Jessica, revealed that Marcus had lied to her about his age and his job. She said he had borrowed money from her and never paid it back. She also mentioned that he had been incredibly jealous and controlling, constantly monitoring her phone and her social media activity. As I listened to their stories, a disturbing pattern emerged. Marcus was a manipulator, a liar, and a con artist. He preyed on women, exploited their vulnerabilities, and then disappeared without a trace. And now, he was trying to do the same to me. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Marcus's accusation wasn't just a random act of cruelty, it was part of a larger pattern of deceit and manipulation. He was trying to deflect blame, to paint himself as the victim, to avoid taking responsibility for his actions. Armed with this new information, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let him get away with it. I would expose his lies, protect myself and Eva, and make him pay for the pain he had caused. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to fight. I had to protect myself and my daughter from this man. And the more I learned, the more I realized just how dangerous he could be. The information I gathered about Marcus's past solidified my decision. I was going to sue him. It wasn't just about the money, although that would certainly help. It was about holding him accountable for his actions, for the emotional abuse, the abandonment, and the slanderous accusation that had threatened to destroy my life. I consulted with a lawyer, a strong, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Evans. I laid out my case, explaining everything that had happened, from Marcus's sudden departure to his shocking phone call. I showed her the evidence I had collected, the emails, the text messages, the statements from the other women. Ms. Evans listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Rachel, you have a strong case. Marcus's behavior is reprehensible, and his accusation is potentially libelous. I believe we can successfully sue him for emotional distress, abandonment, and slander." Hearing those words was incredibly validating. For months, I had felt like I was going crazy, like I was the only one who saw Marcus for who he really was. To have a legal professional confirm my suspicions and offer to fight for me was a huge relief. My reasons for suing Marcus were complex. First and foremost, I wanted to protect myself and Eva. His accusation had been incredibly damaging, and I worried about the long-term consequences. I wanted to clear my name, to ensure that no one would ever believe his lies. Secondly, I wanted to hold him accountable for abandoning his responsibilities as a father. Eva deserved financial support, and she deserved to know that her father was being held responsible for his actions. Finally, I wanted to send a message to Marcus, and to other men like him, that they couldn't get away with treating women this way. They couldn't abandon their families, lie about their partners, and then play the victim. There would be consequences. The decision to sue Marcus wasn't easy. I knew it would be a long, expensive, and emotionally draining process. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do. I was determined to fight for myself, for Eva, and for all the other women who had been hurt by Marcus's deceit. I would turn the tables on him, and I would make him regret ever crossing me. And I was ready to use everything I had to win. His lies, his history, everything. It was time for him to face the music. Building a strong legal case against Marcus was like piecing together a complicated puzzle. We had to prove that he had not only abandoned me and Eva but also that his accusation was false and malicious. Fortunately, Marcus, in his arrogance, had left a trail of evidence behind him. The first piece of the puzzle was his medical records. Ms. Evans subpoenaed his medical records, revealing a timeline that contradicted his claims. The records showed that Marcus had been diagnosed with HIV and hepatitis B several years before he even met me. This proved that he knew he had these conditions and that he had deliberately concealed them from me. The second piece of the puzzle was the text messages. I had saved all of our text conversations, and they painted a clear picture of Marcus's behavior. There were messages where he expressed his love and commitment to me, messages where he promised to be a good father to Eva, and messages where he denied having any health problems. These messages directly contradicted his later claims and showed that he had been intentionally deceptive. We also used the text messages to demonstrate his pattern of emotional abuse. There were messages where he belittled me, criticized my appearance, and tried to control my behavior. These messages, combined with the testimony from the other women, helped to establish a pattern of abusive behavior. The statements from Emily and Jessica were also crucial to our case. They testified about Marcus's manipulative and deceitful behavior, confirming that he had a history of exploiting and abandoning women. Their testimony helped to establish a pattern of conduct and showed that his actions towards me were not an isolated incident. Finally, we had the results of my and Eva's HIV and hepatitis B tests, which definitively proved that I had not infected him with anything. This evidence completely undermined his accusation and showed that he had been deliberately lying to harm me. With all of this evidence in hand, Ms. Evans was able to build a solid legal case against Marcus. We had proven that he had abandoned me and Eva, that he had lied about his health, that he had engaged in emotional abuse, and that he had deliberately slandered my name. We were confident that we would win the case. The pieces were all there, and the picture they created was damning. He had nowhere to hide from the truth. It was time for the court to deliver justice. And I was ready. The courtroom felt enormous, intimidating. Everything was so official and serious. The judge sat high up at the front, and everyone spoke in hushed voices. It was like being in a movie, but this was my real life. This was my fight. I had to tell my story in front of everyone, even Marcus. It was scary, but I knew I had to be brave. Ms. Evans stood beside me, guiding me, making sure I understood everything. She asked me questions, and I answered as honestly as I could. I talked about the happy times with Marcus, about Eva's birth, and then about the day he left. It was hard to talk about the pain, about the loneliness, about the fear. But I also talked about my strength, about my determination to provide for Eva, about my resolve to not let Marcus win. Marcus's lawyer tried to make me look bad, tried to twist my words. He asked me mean questions, trying to make me cry. But I didn't let him. I stayed strong, and I told the truth. Emily and Jessica also testified. They told their stories about Marcus, about how he had lied to them and hurt them. It was brave of them to come forward, and I was grateful for their support. Marcus himself had to speak too. He tried to deny everything, but Ms. Evans showed him the evidence. She showed him the medical records, the text messages, and the statements from the other women. He couldn't deny the truth. The judge listened carefully to everything. She was fair and just. She asked questions and made sure everyone had a chance to speak. The trial lasted for several days. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically. But I never gave up. I knew I had to keep fighting for myself and for Eva. Throughout the trial, my family was my rock. My mom sat in the courtroom every day, holding my hand and offering words of encouragement. My dad took care of Eva, making sure she was happy and safe. My sister Sarah helped me prepare my testimony, quizzing me on the details and helping me stay calm. Their love and support gave me the strength to keep going, even when I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. They reminded me that I was not alone and that I was fighting for something important. Despite the stress and the anxiety, I never lost sight of my goal. I wanted to hold Marcus accountable for his actions, to protect myself and Eva, and to send a message that abuse and deceit would not be tolerated. I was ready for the final decision. I knew in my heart that justice would be served. And whatever that looked like, I knew I could handle it. I was stronger than I ever thought possible. And it was all thanks to Eva and my family. They were my everything. The day the judge announced her decision, I could barely breathe. I sat in the courtroom, holding my mom's hand, my heart pounding in my chest. Ms. Evans stood beside me, her expression calm and confident. The judge spoke slowly and deliberately, reviewing the evidence and summarizing the arguments. She talked about Marcus's abandonment, his lies, his emotional abuse, and his slanderous accusation. She talked about my strength, my resilience, and my determination to protect my daughter. Finally, she reached her verdict. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Rachel Williams, she announced. The defendant, Marcus Thompson, is found guilty of emotional abuse, abandonment, and slander. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful that I almost collapsed. Tears streamed down my face as I hugged my mom and Ms. Evans. We had won. Justice had been served. The judge ordered Marcus to pay child support for Eva, to cover her expenses and ensure that she had a secure future. She also ordered him to pay legal damages to me, to compensate for the emotional distress and financial hardship he had caused. The amount of money wasn't as important as the principle. It was a validation of my pain, a recognition of my suffering, and a declaration that Marcus's actions were unacceptable. More than the money, though, was the feeling of victory. It wasn't just about winning the lawsuit, it was about reclaiming my life, about taking back my power, about proving that I was stronger than I ever thought possible. For so long, I had felt like a victim, like I was at the mercy of Marcus's cruelty and deceit. But now, I was free. I had stood up to him, I had fought back, and I had won. The lawsuit didn't erase the pain, and it didn't undo the damage that Marcus had caused. But it did give me a sense of closure, a sense of peace, and a sense of hope for the future. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I was still a single mother, struggling to make ends meet. But I also knew that I could handle anything that came my way. I had survived the worst, and I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. Marcus had tried to destroy me, but he had failed. Instead, he had inadvertently given me the opportunity to discover my own strength, to find my own voice, and to create a better future for myself and my daughter. The victory was sweet, a testament to my unwavering spirit and a promise of brighter days to come. It was a new beginning. Life after the lawsuit wasn't a fairy tale, but it was a far cry from the nightmare I had been living. The child support payments helped ease the financial strain, allowing me to focus on my career and on raising Eva. I found a full-time job as a graphic designer, a stable position that provided health insurance and a steady income. I enrolled Eva in a wonderful daycare program where she thrived. She made friends, learned new things, and blossomed into a happy, confident little girl. It warmed my heart to see her so content. The scars from Marcus's betrayal remained, but they began to fade with time. I started attending therapy, where I learned to process my emotions, to heal from the trauma, and to build stronger, healthier relationships. I also reconnected with my friends, who had been so supportive throughout the ordeal. We went out for coffee, saw movies, and laughed together. I realized how important it was to have a strong support system, to surround myself with people who loved and cared about me. As Eva grew older, I made sure to teach her about honesty, respect, and the importance of standing up for herself. I wanted her to know that she was strong, capable, and deserving of love and happiness. I also became an advocate for other women who had experienced emotional abuse and abandonment. I shared my story online, offering words of encouragement and support. I volunteered at a local women's shelter, helping women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. I wanted to use my experience to make a difference, to empower other women to find their voices and to take control of their lives. I wanted them to know that they were not alone and that they could overcome anything. My message to other women is this: you are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than you know. You are capable of achieving anything you set your mind to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be ashamed to share your story. Don't let anyone silence you. Your voice matters, and your experiences are valid. And never, ever give up on yourself. You deserve to be happy, to be loved, and to live a life filled with joy and fulfillment. Marcus may have tried to break me, but he failed. He may have thought he could get away with his lies and his abuse, but he was wrong. I fought back, I won, and I emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. Today, I am a successful career woman, a loving mother, and an advocate for other women. I am proud of who I have become, and I am grateful for the lessons I have learned. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm a survivor, and I'm thriving. And that's all that matters. You don't get to walk out, lie on me, then cry victim. Not on my watch. And I hope my story inspires other women to say the same. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.